Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. Welcome to the .NET Show. This episode is part 3 of building a mobile podcast app for .NET Rocks, a weekly podcast for .NET developers that I co-host with Richard Campbell. Today we're picking up where we left off last week. Currently, we have a blank Xamarin Forms app that downloads and plays MP3 files, caches the MP3 files, plays files from that cache when offline, and gets metadata about those MP3 files and the episodes from the podcast feed for .NET Rocks. In this episode, we're going to prepare the app for its next adventure by converting it to a flyout app, which uses the Xamarin Forms shell template. We'll also make a few minor changes before we're done. The purpose of this episode is to introduce you to shell apps and show you how you can convert your own Xamarin Forms apps to shell apps so they'll be ready to upgrade to MAUI in the future. And speaking of MAUI, my sponsor, DevExpress, is bullish about MAUI. So much so that they want you to have their Xamarin Forms tools for free. Go to devexmaui.the.netshow.com to see for yourself. And speaking of free, each week I share my code and a cookbook for you to follow along with in this GitHub repo right here. So without any more whitewashing, let's jump into part 3 and start the frog race. And that's coming right up on the .NET Show. So at this point in the application, we've written all the code to show metadata for each episode, and we can also download, cache, and play MP3 files with URLs that come from that metadata. Now the next thing we're going to do is refactor this code into a new project, one that uses the newer shell template, which is recommended by Microsoft for all modern Xamarin Forms projects, and will also help us when it comes time to upgrade to MAUI sometime in the future. The shell template also gives us a slick navigation system, which we'll need in order to bring our app to the next level. However, in this episode, we're just going to focus on getting our app to work as is with the new template, and then in the next installment, we'll start transforming the app into a real podcast client. Now, I want to take a minute here to shout out to my friend James Montemagno from Microsoft. I learned how to use the default shell template and to do all the stuff that we're going to do here to, delete the stuff we don't need from his excellent YouTube series, Xamarin Forms 101. I highly recommend it. As I said, this is running on my phone, by the way. And yes, it's downloading 1,700 or some odd shows, well, the metadata for each show anyway. And there is a bug, a logic bug in the play button where if you, start playing different shows, it's going to get stuck on the second show that you play. But it doesn't really matter because we're going to redo all this anyway. But I just wanted you to see, that this is where we are right here. And this is running on my Samsung phone. So the first job of the day is to add a new project to this solution. It's going to be a mobile app, a Xamarin Forms app. And we're going to call this .NET Rocks. Zoom in a little for you right there. So hit the Create button, and this is where the shell template comes in. What we did before was we just chose blank, an empty app with a single screen. That's what our app is. But there are also these two options which use the shell template. Flyout, which is an app with a side menu that can be collapsed, the basic hamburger menu, and then tabbed. So this is an app that uses tabs to navigate between sections. We're going to choose Flyout. Now, they give you, as you can see, this nice little README file, and the template comes with a whole bunch of goo, a whole bunch of stuff. Look up here. Let me expand views, view models, services, and models. They've already got like a little demo in here, So what we're going to do, and thanks to James for this, making me feel like I can actually do this without losing anything, is we're going to delete the models, we're going to delete the services, we're going to delete the view models, and we're going to delete the views. Because this is really a demo, and we just want to get rid of this goo. And down in here, app XAML and app shell XAML, we're going to remove some things too. So follow along with me. Let's select all of these guys right here. Delete those. Next, we're going to add our own default content page to the views folder. So add new item or Control-Shift-A. Go down to Xamarin Forms, select content page. We're just going to call this home page. Now, here's the tip. Don't call it main page, because that name is already taken and it won't work. So we're calling it home page. So next we're going to focus on these two files right here. Well, 4 files actually. App XAML, the code behind app shell XAML, and the code behind for that. So let's go to app XAML. And you can see that there are some styles here. Well, there's one style defined for the button. And we're not going to use that, so I'm just going to take out that entire style section. Now the code behind, I need to clear some things up. Obviously, we don't have this mock data store anymore. We don't have, we're not using some of these using statements. So let's just get rid of all that. Next, let's go to app shell XAML. And these are the styles and the resources that the shell uses, for the fly out and all of that. A lot of this stuff is used by the system, but starting down here after shell resources, we're going to delete all of these things and replace them with a single flyout item. So in other words, when we drop down that hamburger menu, this list of flyout items is your menu. So we're only going to have one. The title is going to be home. The icon is the icon feed. There's a few icons in the system that you'll see. We may or may not use them, but this one is there, and it kind of looks like a list, which is kind of convenient because our home page is going to have a list of shows. And then the route and the content template, which we have set to home page. Now let's clean up the code behind for app shell. This has on menu item clicked, and it has some routing registrations and all that. We don't need any of that, so we'll just get rid of that. Now look over here. We've got 3 .NET Rocks apps and 3 mobile DNR apps in the same solution. Guess what? That's okay. But I'm going to set this one, Android, to be the startup project. .NET Rocks Android. And let's run it. There you go. Welcome to Xamarin Forms. Now here's something really cool that we can do. I'm going to open the homepage XAML file. We're going to test the hot reload. So I'm going to say something like, in this label text, .NET Rocks podcast client. And when I hit save, watch this over here. Boom. How cool is that? Now we can experiment with some other things. For example, I'm going to replace this entire stack layout with this XAML. Now you can see my font is bigger, font size title. My vertical options are start and expand instead of center. So rather than at the center, it's at the start, the top. And my horizontal options are the same. I've also given a little top margin to my stack layout. So that means start 20 pixels down from the top. The margin, left, top, right, bottom. So all I'm doing is setting a top margin here. All right, now the next step is we're going to add all the NuGet packages that we've got in our mobile DNR project to our .NET Rocks project. And there's an actually easy way to do that because they're all in the same solution. right-click on the solution and then select Manage NuGet Packages for the solution. And when we go to Installed, then just click on any of these. Well, this one is DevEx, right? So let's go to our DevExpress source. But now you can see, look, this package is installed in the mobile DNR projects, but not in the .NET Rocks projects. So all I have to do is check these three off and then say Install. I know this feature has been in Visual Studio for a long time, but I just love it. And it's coming in really handy right now. So we'll do the same thing for the Monkey file store. Set this package source back to NuGet. Monkey Cache file store. My 3 projects are already checked off. All I got to do is say install. And we'll just go down the line. The .NET Standard library, if you look, is only in the UI projects, in the Xamarin Forms projects, so we don't need that in all of them. Plug in Media Manager Forms. This is our audio player. There it is. Refactored MVVM helpers. James Montemagno's awesome library. And then Xamarin Essentials and Xamarin Forms are already installed. So that's all we had to do. Now, if you remember, the next step was to go into the Android and iOS projects and add cross-media manager support. So we're going to go to main activity, which is sort of the sub-main, if you will, of the Android project. And we're going to add this guy. Cross-media manager current.init this. And we'll qualify that namespace. All right, so just like we did the last time. Now, in the iOS project, we're going to do the same thing, but the startup, if you will, is called app delegate. And in the app delegate, we're going to do the same thing. Right after we initialize Xamarin Forms, we're going to initialize Cross Media Manager and qualify that namespace. Now, the next thing we need to do is copy the models. Remember the models we have? We've got a bunch of models here. File, guest, link, show details, sponsors, and tags. Let's just copy them right up to our new models folder. But now we need to change this to show .NET Rocks.models as the namespace. So I'm actually going to use this. Control H. There we go. We're changing namespace mobile DNR models to namespace .NET Rocks models in the current project. Now let's just make sure that we're okay here. Files looks good. Show looks good. Sponsor looks good. Show details looks good. Link looks good. Guest and tag. Excellent. Next, we're going to copy API service from the services folder. Just copy that up. We're going to need the same dealy-bop here. Just these 2 namespaces that need to change, and everything's good there. Now the view model. So the view model, if you remember, is in main view model here. We need to copy that to our view models folder and rename it. I'm going to slow double click on it here in Solution Explorer and call it Home Page View Model. That, of course, changes the name. And now we will change the namespace mobile DNR to .NET Rocks in the current document. Change all. And that is that. Next, this inverse bool converter. Remember we used that as a value converter to show and hide buttons and things? So let's copy that up. Now, where to copy it? You know, you might have a converters folder, but we don't need to do that, I guess. Not right now. So let's just copy it to the main .NET Rocks root. Call this .NET Rocks. Change the namespace. And that's that. Now comes the big one. We're going to modify this home page XAML. And I'm going to copy and paste a whole bunch of stuff here. This is essentially copied and pasted from this main page XAML here. So I added a view models namespace because the view model is no longer just in the default namespace, .NET Rocks. It's in .NET Rocks view models. I've moved the main stack layout into this content page content, which is required for a shell application. I've added the label at the top that we just configured before. And I see there's a problem right here with view models, homepage view model. And if you can guess what the reason is, it's looking for that in a view models namespace. And yet our view model, we set the namespace to .NET Rocks. So we need to make this view models. Happy, happy. All right, let's run this thing. There we go. And now you can see I've got my home button right there. My cheeseburger menu, if you will. Hamburger menu, but you know, cheeseburgers are better than hamburgers, right? And I can scroll through these guys just like I could before. And I can even play a show. And that's coming out of my phone, which I'm holding up to the microphone so you can hear it. All right, I told you we weren't going to do any refactoring yet, and we're not going to do major stuff, but I do want to fix one thing. Let's modify the app to download the first 20 shows, the metadata only, of course, and then display a button to load the next 20. And so every time we push that button, it will load the next 20 shows in the list. And that will significantly reduce the load on the API. So for that, we need to keep track of show numbers. So I'm going to add a model to my models folder called get by show numbers request. Because we need to add some stuff to our API in order for this to work. Now the controller on the server end already implements this, so really I only need to implement an API method or two. Get by show numbers request basically takes the name of a show, in this case it's going to be .NET Rocks, and then it has a list of indexes. Well, they're actually show numbers. So it's basically saying get me show number 500 through 520 or whatever. Next, we have a couple of methods that we want to add to our API service. Let's go down to the bottom here. All right, the first one is get show numbers. So this is going to return a list of all the show numbers. All of them. Now that's obviously not a lot of data, 1,700 some odd integers at this point. But this is good because we need to know how many total there are, and we also need to know what those numbers are. The next one is get by show numbers. So here we've got our get by show numbers request. It's going to return a list of shows. So this is a lot like get all, except that we're specifying exactly which numbers to get. Now to the view model. Let's add a method here called get next batch of shows. Now there's a couple of things that it's expecting. One is show numbers, which is a list of int, and the other is the last show number, which is an int. So let's add those right now. Now also, we're going to need to use link here. So using system link, we need to add that. And there's another one, records to read. So that is an integer, and we're going to default that to 20. And that is that. That's our get next batch of shows. So what does this do? Well, just what you think it does. All right. Our show numbers count is going to be 0 in the beginning. So we're going to, if it is 0, get those show numbers. And if there's a problem with that, we're just going to return. Otherwise, the last show number is the first show number plus 1. Then we have our request. showname.net rocks, and we're getting the indexes from in between the last show number and the last show number minus 20. Remember, we're going down. So we're starting with the highest one, and we're getting the 20 below that. So let's say the highest one is 1,000. The first time we hit this, we want to get 980 to 1,000. And then we call API service get by show numbers. We get that next batch. And if it is not null, then we add it to all shows. Instead of all shows having everything in it, we're just going to add that range. And then we set the last show number. It's pretty simple. Now, the next thing we need is add that button to the bottom of home page XAML. Now, if you take a look here, here's our main stack layout. Here's the top label. Here's the label right before it that is visible when we're playing, and it shows the current status. Then we have the collection view, and the collection view shows all of the shows. So right here below the collection view, we want to add this. So here's our button. The text says load more shows, and we've set the command equal to load more shows, which doesn't exist yet. Let's go create it in the view model. So just like with the play command, we have an I command, load more shows, and then a public getter. And if it's null, we will create a new async command, because remember, we're calling this asynchronously, get next batch of shows. And get next batch of shows is the one that we already added, right? We just went through that. So now there's one more glaring problem here that we haven't fixed. Can you spot it? Can you spot it? Anyone? 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 Yeah, we're still loading all shows in the constructor to the view model. So all we got to do is change load all shows to get next batch of shows. And now instead of loading all on startup, we're going to just get the first 20. And there we go. So you notice as I'm scrolling through these 20, there you go. The scroll bar is much, much longer, indicating that there's less data there. And there it is. We're at the bottom. Notice the .NET Rocks podcast client label stays at the top. The load more shows button stays at the bottom. And if I click the load more shows button, then I can continue scrolling. And we have now 40 shows, which is great. Now, of course, this is missing some stuff like search. And also we need a master detail kind of setup. So instead of when we hit this button, playing the podcast, we want to click on that to go to another page that has all the details, the guest information, and audio play, stop, pause buttons, and all that stuff. So that is where we're going to stop today. And in the next episode, as I said, we're going to really dive into refactoring this thing and making it a real application. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Please visit blazertrain.com and the .NETshow.com for more great content.